Good evening, genders and genderless. Welcome to another episode of Pissing Off Your Art Teacher. I'm your host, Xabio Arts. Let's eat some ass. I know how frustrating it can be to try to shade something, and it's like, where do I even start? This is a good place to start. It's got like a tiny bit of fundamentals in it. It's got some cheating methods in it, so you don't actually have to think about it if you don't want to. And then if you want to move on from here, you'll have just enough knowledge to be able to know what you're doing to be able to move on to other tutorials. So if you start going into like Proco and stuff like that, Godspeed. Good luck to you. We can't shade anything until we draw something, right? Let's get it. Oh man, my hands are so shaky today. I should have eaten something. No. Bad. That looks terrifying. There we go. Now I'm just gonna erase the whole thing so that all those lines disappear, little flippy lines. The most important part of shading is to use the side of your pencil for this technique, okay? So we're just going to take the right side of everything and we're gonna do like a little pillow shading, I guess. And the bottom right here, bottom right side of this guy, bottom right side of this guy. Okay, now watch this. This is the very important part, okay? We're gonna use our middle finger and smooth this baby out. Don't worry if it goes over the lines. Now, we're gonna take this very fancy, yummy, delicious eraser. And we're going to erase the outside of it and a little line on the side. So watch this, watch what happens. All of a sudden, we're creating some rim light on the side. And that is the key to making it really pop. And don't forget to erase outside of those lines too on the places that you smudged outside. And you can see it's already starting to come together. We're not even done yet. Super easy, just the pillow shade with your finger and then erase that. What did I just call it? Rim lighting, yeah, that. And I can go right over the top of these lines. Oh, so easy, baby. Thank you very much. We can erase some of these wrinkles too, like they're popping out, right? Cut into that. And we'll actually give some shading in here too. Oh, that's looking nice. Thank you. Oh, yes. Thank you, darling. Thank you. Right here, any place that's gonna catch the light from the top, you can make like a little highlight. So like this right here, watch this. Boom. Now it looks 3D. Now, the last step that you need to do after you do the shading on the side, smear it out, and then do the rim lighting and clean up the outsides, last thing you need to do is clean up the lines that got erased that need to come back, okay? So, we'll kind of go over the top of all this stuff again. And once we do this part, this last part, we'll be done with the drawing. And I'll explain at the end how exactly this works, because this is kind of a cheater way to do it, right? It has some roots in drawing fundamentals. Even though you're not really technically learning anything with this technique, it does have some fundamentals attached to it, and I'll teach you why it works and the science behind it. Man, my hands are so shaky today too. Oh my gosh, this was like a really bad time to try to record a tutorial. But that's okay, it's a good thing that I really don't care about this drawing at all. It helps when you don't care about your art. And then we'll do a little bit of shading under here too. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, why do I need to erase that part? Why don't I just shade it like this with that line in mind? That's great, you should do that. The thing is, being able to just shade the whole thing and then erase it is like an easy way for your brain to understand it. So I guess once you understand it, then you can just go right there. It's like when you draw with construction lines, right? Sometimes you have to start with a circle and then another circle and then merge them together and then erase the construction lines and blah, blah, blah. And then some people, they just see that the construction lines in their head and then they just draw it. It's that same type of thing. So if you could see where this line will go on the outside, then you can just do it without having to do any of that erasing or anything. Now, we do have one problem, okay? And the problem is that some of these parts are darker than the other parts. So for example, this top part of her shirt right here, as well as these shoes, need to be darker for the whole thing. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna darken up that whole thing. We're just gonna shade over the top of it. And you can do this from the beginning. I'm doing it step by step so that you understand the process, but you can start by shading the darker parts darker before you even go into any of the shadows. And this is called changing the local value. So we're going to color this part darker. And then now you might be thinking to yourself, oh, but Andrew, the shading disappeared because you colored it. Well, you're right, it did disappear, but we're gonna bring it back and I'll show you how. Now that you know the process, we're gonna do it without doing all of those steps, okay? So I'll just take from this side, draw that line as a border, and then I will slowly, gradually fade it out with my super amazing pencil shading technique. We're gonna do the same thing up here. So we're gonna make it darker over here without dipping into that line right there, that white line. So the reason why I started with this drawing the way that I did, being able to sketch it out and then erase the whole thing and blah, 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 is because that way you can be careless with it, right? A lot of new artists are super scared of messing up. This way, when you start the drawing like I did in the beginning of the video, you won't have to worry about messing up. In fact, that's part of the technique, is to mess up. And then once you have these steps in your head, then you can start to go through and understand where you're putting the shadows and stuff. So now we have the same shading, except this whole value is darker. Same with the boots. And just for the fun of it, we will do that with these wrist things too. So now that we've done this, let's explain why this works, okay? You need to be able to take a rectangle and shade it from light to dark. There's a couple different ways that you can do this. One of them is by doing it in steps like that. The other way is to just go like this. Right? Oh, I forgot the shadows. So let's put this technique on a sphere, okay? 3D shape. So there's a few different parts of a sphere. There is the overall local value, which is just the color that it is, right? Without any lighting put on top of it. There's going to be a shadow. Oh man, I bet I made a bad curve right there. But then there's also something called a core shadow. And that is a little ring that's darker. And the thing is, it doesn't go all the way to the bottom because this part right here has bounced light coming over to the side. And then there's also a highlight right here. So if we put all of those things together, what we have is a sphere that's shaded like this. And there's a little ring on the bottom, and that is this part right here. Okay, so what we're basically doing is shading this almost like a sphere. We're gonna do the same thing that we did on our character and just kind of blend that out a little bit. Try not to go too far into this little ring right here. We'll make it darker towards the bottom for that core shadow. Let's do it with a cylinder, okay? Block off a part right here that's gonna be white, and then we're gonna do this right here. The exact, look, we have a rectangle right here. We're going to get that little gradient in there. All right, so we're gonna start off dark, and then we're gonna gradually get lighter as we go through, and then it's gonna be super lightest when it gets to be around about there. And then you can even add a little tiny bit of a gradient right here. Now, the way that we do a darker cylinder, because that one's like a bright white metal cylinder, I guess, whatever. The way that we can shade a darker cylinder is like this. So we'll do our ellipse, come down, we'll copy this bottom curve to right here. We're going to shade this whole thing lightly, but since the light is coming from the top, this part right here is going to be getting more light, so we'll just make this part a little bit darker to compensate for that. Okay, now we're on top of this. The local value is darker. We're going to do that same shading technique here. Okay, so we'll block off a section here, and we will make that gradient go all the way across, nice and smooth. Make it a little bit darker on this side too. So now we have a white cylinder and a dark cylinder. And actually these ears are bugging me, so we're going to do that same thing here, okay? So we're going to shade this whole thing a little bit darker, block off that little spot, and then shade it across. And actually you can see that these shoulders right here are perfect spheres. Now, if only there were a place that you could have YouTube tutorials like this, except it would go through entire lessons and it was organized like a proper class. Oh wait, there is. Guess who sponsored this video? That's right, this video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare has video classes on stuff like animation, creative writing, illustration, all kinds of stuff. Found a juicy one on plants by the plant queen Christopher Griffin himself. Although plants don't really have anything to do with this. My dad asked me to use my Skillshare account because he wanted to learn how to make bread, and now he's just making bread all the time. Thanks, Skillshare. Thanks for the bread. The first 1,000 people who click the link in my description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium. You can squeeze so much out of that free trial, but if you want to keep going after it ends, it's less than $10 a month for all the learning you can handle, baby. And a big thank you to all my Patreon supporters. You guys are going to be the ones that help me rise above the poverty line and move out of my parents' house. That's gonna happen this year. I swear it's gonna happen this year. I really hope that this helped because I know how frustrating it